function. So Katie is going to let me know if you raise your hands. This is my first time on the other side of the coin where, usually I'm the student and I'm like, they're struggling with the Zoom. So now I'm struggling with the Zoom. So be patient, please. And thank you all so much for coming. It takes off a huge amount of stress and anxiety on my plate that I know like literally everybody attending the talk. So thank you for your support and coming to this presentation. So let's kick it off. My name is Ashleigh Evans. I am a student midwife at the Yale School of Nursing. And basically what we're going to talk about today is a Black student perspective, a Black student midwife's perspective, that's me, on racial disparities within maternal morbidity. Okay, so there will be birth pictures in this presentation. These are some of my favorites. These were given to me by a local doula named Whitley at New Being Doulas here in Connecticut. So if you're a little squeamish, like here is a heads up that there will be more birth pictures in this lecture. I know most people in here are midwives, so I'll like give it a second so you can look at all the pictures because like they are gorgeous. Okay, so before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Ashleigh. Graduated from George Washington University with a degree in biomedical engineering in 2013. I was in the Navy from once I graduated to 2019. And then at my last duty station in Jacksonville, Florida, I linked up with a home birth midwife and I was her birth assistant from 2017 to 2019. And that's how I got into the birth community. Once I separated from the Navy in 2019, I took a gap year off, traveled to 14 countries, and then headed on up and came here. And now here I am. So I am now in my second semester of GEPN, which means I will take the RN test, the NCLEX, at the end of July. Okay, so before we can really get into the conversation of maternal morbidity, we have to define a few things. So first, we're going to define pregnancy-associated mortality. And what that means is pregnancy-associated is that it is a death within 1 year of the end of pregnancy, regardless of that cause of death. So whatever it is that causes the death is associated in this particular definition, even if it has nothing to do with being pregnant or childbirth at all. That includes, motor vehicle accidents, God forbid, suicide, anything that has to, that leads to a termination of life. Pregnancy-related mortality, however, is any death within 1 year that was caused by a complication or injury related to pregnancy. So anything like peripartum cardiomyopathy.
Meeting.
Anything such as peripartum cardiomyopathy, hemorrhage, infection that has to do that with the pregnancy itself and it leads to death is the
make sure before I
I don't think you're muted.
Crazy. Let me see. Next Friday, I should be okay. Is that May 7th?
That's you.
Okay, I should be okay.
I think I can. Okay. What we're going to focus on in this presentation, right, is this small green circle right here, and that's maternal mortality. And maternal mortality is any death that happens within 6 weeks of childbirth or that pregnancy. And regardless of what the reason was, as long as it was related to that pregnancy. And the way we measure maternal mortality is the average number of people who die during childbirth out of 100,000 births that led to a live baby. So for example, if the average number of people who die during childbirth is 5, and out of 100,000 live births, then we'll say 5.3 out of 100,000. So for the rest of this presentation, when I use numbers, I'm not going to say out of 100,000. I'll just say the average, and then you know that it's out of 100,000. All right, so as you can already tell that this scope is huge, it's massive. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of narrow the scope a little bit. So in this presentation, We will be talking about racial disparities between Black non-Hispanic birthing individuals and white non-Hispanic birthing individuals. That's really important because oftentimes when you talk about death, we forget that death is the absolute worst income, or worst outcome. We're not talking about the horrific trauma that people experience, the near-death experiences like Serena Williams faced. Those aren't included in the stories, and those stories are equally important. But because of the scope, we're going to narrow it down to people who actually die. What's also important is that this does not include Native American or Native Alaskan families who actually suffer similar rates to Black people. And that's really important once you see the numbers that we're talking about. It is a crisis level. So please don't forget about the people who suffer similar outcomes because they're not included in this lecture. However, they are equally important. And then of course, we are just talking about maternal morbidity statistics here in the United States. All right, let's get down to work. So we're going to break this up into two different problems, and then we're going to mash it and meet it into one. So the first problem, right, is the United States has the highest maternal morbidity statistics within the developed world. So even when you take race out of it, we still have a problem, right? 17 out of every 100,000 live births is the national average across all races here in the United States as of 2018. Now, when you compare that to other developed countries, or first world countries, we're going to call them developed countries for the rest of this presentation. When you look at Canada, you know, you're two times more likely to die in childbirth than you are in Canada. 4 times as likely if you were in the UK. You know, we're 17 times as likely than New Zealand. So this idea that childbirth is inherently dangerous, not necessarily, because when you leave the US, it's not. Clearly, it's not. On top of that, the United States is only one of 2 countries where that rate is still increasing and not decreasing. The US is considered the only developed country that has an increasing maternal morbidity rate. The other country is the Dominican Republic. I think, however, don't quote me on this, I think we are, as of, you know, literally the last 2 years, we are starting to see a slow trickle in the right direction as far as the numbers decreasing. Now, on top of the maternal morbidity statistics that we see in the US world, like as a whole, then we look at, when we break it down into races, then we see that it's a much, much bigger problem, crisis level problem for Black people and Black women. Black women are 2.5 times more likely to die in childbirth than non-Hispanic white women, and that is on average. So whereas white women have an average of 15.4, Black women see an average of 34.1. Now, when this research was starting to come to the forefront of like American consciousness, when it started to become a big deal, one of the first questions you saw academia pose is, well, Black women aren't as educated, Black women don't have access to as good of hospitals, and Black women are lower on the socioeconomic status. So what if it's because they don't have access to as good of care? And that was proven to be false. Neither socioeconomic status nor having access to education decreases your likelihood of dying in childbirth. So a Black woman with a college degree or higher is still 1.5 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related injury than a white woman without a high school diploma. So I just threw a ton of words at you, a lot of words. Let's look at some pictures and see if we can break this down. Okay, so here in the blue, we see the maternal morbidity statistics broken up by education for white women in blue and Black women in orange. Okay, so we can see here that Black women without a high school diploma are still almost 2 times more likely to die than a white woman without a high school diploma. And even if they do have a college degree or more, that number doesn't change drastically. What does change drastically, as you can see here, is that Black women with a high school diploma are nearly 5 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women, or Black women with a college degree, excuse me, are nearly 5 times more likely to die in childbirth or due to maternal morbidity than white women. Let that sink in for a second. WTF. I really need everybody to kind of sit back right now and take in these numbers. This is an absolute crisis, especially when you remember that in countries like New Zealand and in the UK and Finland have nearly almost completely eliminated maternal morbidity. So please keep that level, that pit in your stomach, that oh my gosh, please keep that in the back of your mind for the rest of the presentation. So before we can really talk about why our maternal morbidity statistics are the way that we are, we can't get very far without talking about the history of obstetrics and maternal care. So J. Marion Sims is known to be the founder of gynecology. The reason why he is the prominent figure in obstetrics is because he cured or fixed vesicovaginal fistulas. And what a vesicovaginal fistula is it is an opening between the bladder and the vagina so that urine uncontrollably leaks out of the vagina. And it causes, of course, uncontrollable incontinence. However, J. Marion Sims never asked for these women's consent when he was doing these surgeries. What he did is he went to slave masters and said, hey, I can get your property, your crops back into your fields, back into your homes. If you give them to me and let them stay in my backyard hospital while he basically experimented on them to figure out how to fix these fistulas. One of the most famous victims, her name is Lucy. She nearly died of sepsis after he tried to fix it by taking a sponge and just leaving it in her vagina. And of course, it got infected and she nearly died of sepsis. The first person that he actually cured of vesicovaginal fistula, her name was Anarcha, and he cured her using steel sutures. And we all know what the process of suturing is. And it took her 13 surgeries before he actually figured out how to adequately and correctly suture the fistula. However, these surgeries were performed without anesthesia. And when he tried to do them on white women could not take the pain of the surgeries. And then when he did actually start performing them on white women, anesthesia was invented. That brings us to the Mississippi appendectomies, also known as forced sterilization. The case that brought this to the forefront of American consciousness was Ralph versus Weinberger, in which two girls were told that they were going to get birth control, Depo-Provera, as their sister had their older sister had gotten before them. Except it wasn't birth control. When they asked the mother to consent for the tubal ligation, she was illiterate. She signed with an X, and they told her that it was birth control. These two girls were 12 and 14. There was also the North Carolina Eugenics Board, which lasted from 1929 to 1974, which sterilized an estimated of 7,500 poor Black women. Now, pretty cool enough, is this picture right here is actually a page from the manual of North Carolina Eugenics Board. And if you read who is eligible for sterilization, it mentions 3 types of people. So it says, the North Carolina law provides specifically for sterilization of 3 types of cases upon authorization of the Eugenics Board. These are the feeble-minded, the epileptic, and the mentally disabled, when it is believed that such an operation would be good for the interests of the individual concerned. Notice that nowhere in this manual does it say poor people, Black people, or poor Black people. However, we know that those were the majority of the people who were sterilized. It's really, really important. And this will be a theme on this lecture, and I hope you take it away. Let me know if I don't articulate it, because it is the most important message to me in this lecture. That when you look at what academia says, and you look at how those words are implemented into practice, they are not the same thing. So when you hear something that sounds like it makes sense and sounds really flowery and has great academic jargon, take a step back and then look at how that academic jargon is put into place in practice. Now, we all know that midwives were the primary catchers in the early 1800s and up until the 1920s. I did not mention midwives anywhere in this history. So where are they? They were actually eradicated once obstetrics came on the scene. Dr. Joseph DeLee, who was a prominent OB at the time, was even quoted by saying that the midwife is a relic of barbarism. In civilized countries, the midwife is wrong and has always been wrong. Keep this in mind too, because history repeats itself. This plays a role in where obstetrics and midwifery lies today. Okay, so I took this video myself. It is a video of a lecture that was here at Yale School of Medicine. It happened October 2020. It's very, very long. It's very jargony. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play about a minute in the beginning so you can hear her preface, and then I'm going to fast forward, and then I'm going to let you hear the end. Just for reference, here, her slide is basically walking you through what she's saying. But I still think it's very important to hear what she's articulating.
Birth timing, in that a prior history, either personal or familial, of preterm birth increases risk. So if a mother has had a previous preterm birth, she's at increased risk for having a subsequent preterm birth. And similarly, if she herself was born preterm, she has an increased risk of having a preterm birth. Or if she has a family member, such as the sister who was born preterm, she also has an increased risk of delivering a preterm baby. In addition, heritability studies of preterm birth have demonstrated that 20 to 40% of the variability in preterm birth can be attributed to genetics. So it seems like for looking at associations between genetics and preterm birth broadly, that there's a strong case to be made that genetics play a factor. Genetic studies and how much heterogeneity is there due to mixing between folks of African ancestry and European ancestry. So all that being said, I think it makes the case to say, yes, we should consider genetic factors, but it's not a guarantee. So,
all right, so I'm going to summarize what this video is saying. So this video is saying that there is research to show that preterm birth has a genetic factor in it, that people who were preemie babies themselves have a more likely chance of delivering a preemie baby. That's what preterm birth means. The conclusion she draws, or the idea that she takes from that, is if preterm birth can be genetic, then why can't Black women dying during childbirth be genetic? Do you catch what I'm putting down about how the history of medicine still plays a role in the culture of medicine today? The past is the root from which the present blossoms.
Birth timing.
Okay, so we've been talking about some pretty heavy topics, eugenics and sterilization, experimenting on Black women, heavy stuff. So let's look at some baby pictures, take a break, get some water, and then I'm going to take 5 minutes for questions if anybody has them. No? Okay, then we're gonna talk about these baby pictures. What I want you to see out of these pictures, none of these pictures happen in a hospital. I want people to see that out of hospital births are safe. Out of hospital births are safe for Black families. Black families exist, Black love exists, Black couples exist, and it is important to see it. We all know it when we say it, but it's important that people who are working in this birth space actually see Black love, Black families, Black happiness, out of hospital births, and how they all come together to potentially play a role in better maternity care for Black people. All right, let's get back to it. So theories about what causes racial disparities. Now we're getting back to that fractionalization, that dichotomy between maternity or midwives and academia/obstetrics. So what you see in the obstetric side, or in this obstetric community, the academic side, is you see a lot of the weathering theory, and a lot of research is based in that weathering theory. What weathering means is that multiple years of experiencing systemic racism causes these micro breakdowns in organs, these micro failures, right? And then pregnancy exacerbates those micro failures and ultimately leads to death. I think it's important when you talk about research to remember that it is influenced by the person who's paying for that research. And everybody has kind of like everybody has a motivation of some sort. But ultimately, when you boil down weathering, what it comes down to is what's wrong with Black women. You also see a lot of task force being created. There's a maternal morbidity task force, like each state has one. There is so one of the leading causes of death is peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is basically heart failure caused by pregnancy. So there's a Black maternal heart health roundtable now. There are a ton of task force being created surrounding this subject. On the flip side, the other side of the coin, you have the home birth midwife / the community activist theory, which is basically that, this is not a theory, this is very much so fact, there are not enough care providers for maternal care, not enough OBs, not enough midwives. And that's basically stressing our hospital system. There are not enough providers for the number of people who are in labor and giving birth. So what that causes is it causes medical racism and implicit provider bias, because instead of, being able to sit with your patient and observe them and take your time, birth is a fairly long process. They have 4, 5, 6 patients at a time. Anybody who could actually be pushing or crowning. So they're thinking they're basically on autopilot, not on conscious thinking things through in a slow, periodic, methodical manner. To exacerbate this problem, you see medical malpractice for OBs is some of the highest in medicine, and that disinsinuates people from becoming OBs. So what's happening is hospitals, especially in states like Georgia, are actually closing down their maternal centers. So that stresses the system even more, because especially places like Georgia, these are rural areas. So families could easily have to drive up to 2 hours just to get to wherever they're going to have their baby. So what you see midwives and community activists saying are, Vice, what's wrong with Black women? What's wrong with our system? Basically, all this comes down to is money and the law. There are so many different kinds of midwives. Some states allow home birth midwives to practice, some states don't. So you have licensed midwives, you have certified professional midwives, you have nurse midwives, which is what I'm schooled to become. And now there's a certified midwife. I'm not really sure what that is, but it is another kind of midwife. On top of that, you have professional organizations who all represent their best interest. And because we're different providers working in the same space, a lot of times lobbying organizations feel that their best interest is in direct conflict with another professional organization's best interest, and they'll lobby against each other. For example, the American College of Gynecology, when nurse midwives first came out, said that our scope needed to be limited because could we actually and competently provide safe labor and delivery care. And now not now, this is as old as time, but the same argument goes for nurse midwives with professional midwives. Do professional midwives really actually know how to provide competent care, especially if you don't have access to a cesarean section, at the drop of a dime that you do in a hospital? I won't go into states as much, but I do want to show like what this looks like. So I started I was my birth born. I started my birth career in Florida. In Florida, nurse midwives cannot attend home births. You have to practice under a physician, so in a birth center or a hospital. But CPMs are licensed and regulated. In Georgia, nurse midwives can do home births, but professional midwives are not regulated. So oftentimes what I would see, my very first births were women coming from Georgia, renting an Airbnb on the Florida coast, and having their babies there and then going back to Georgia. All right, so this is my midwife. She's pregnant with her 5th baby in this picture. Her name's Sam. I took this picture in the corner. I'm really proud of it. So what is my take on all of this? So I started off in the home birth community with the CPM, and then I became a nurse midwife student because I thought that this, brown girl's face would have a difficult time opening the doors to legislative advocacy that I wanted. So maybe the name on the degree would help me open some of those doors. And now I'm in the hospital. The hospital space. So I see both sides of the coin. I actually started my labor and delivery clinicals this month. And now that I've seen both sides, I'm very confident in saying that health or hospital providers are incredibly overworked. They are very overworked, they're stressed, and they're exhausted. And I think that has influenced and solidified, and I do mean solidified, an intervention birth culture. So in hospitals, it is very, very normal, almost more normal than a physiological birth, to expedite labor by using Pitocin, which basically makes your uterus contract stronger and harder. Epidural, of course, is very, very normal, and C-sections are very, very normal. I'll have to check on if our C-section rate has decreased, but as far as I know, 1 out of 3 babies are delivered by C-section. What this causes, before I get there, I also want to share a story with you and how I came to the last point, which is increasing the number of Black birth workers in a hospital will not decrease the racial disparity statistics. So I've only seen 1 Black mother on the floor thus far. And it happened on a night that was very, very busy, so busy that student midwives were called in. And my nurse and I, we were standing next to the front desk, and we saw this Black man, a dad. He was waiting on the front desk person, and she, looked over at us and said, "Hey, can you go check on, this room? Just make sure she's okay." So, backstory: his wife had been pushing the call button, and of course, her nurse was running around. So no one was there to answer her button. So we're like, yeah, we'll absolutely pop in, no problem. Walk in the room, Black family. She's holding her baby in her hands. And as soon as we cross the door, she's like, "Please let me just take a shower. I'm sitting in a pool of blood. I am disgusting. I just want to take a shower." So my nurse is like, "Okay, let me just check your uterus and make sure you're not, hemorrhaging." But basic human principle is to, as long as you can walk, you're ambulatory, let's get you a shower, right? My nurse is lowering the bed. I'm looking for a walker. And her nurse comes back in, and you know, it's an intense night. But she's like, hey, she's going to postpartum. You can tell she's agitated that we're in the room, like we're impinging on her space. And my nurse is like, hey, sorry, we got called in there. And the patient is like, I'm taking a shower. Please let me take a shower before I leave. I'm sweating, I'm sitting in blood. I'm gonna take a shower. And kid you not, this nurse looks at her and says, you can take one at postpartum. So now this patient who's sitting in blood has to transfer over to a clean bed, walk past the shower, and get into a clean stretcher, a clean transfer bed. The worst part about it for me, right, is that I'm a nursing student. The two nurses are white. So she looks me in my eyes and she's waiting for me to speak up for her. And everybody knows I'm pretty passionate about this subject. And I didn't say anything because I was a student, I wasn't qualified, and I didn't feel like I could. So when you bring Black people into this space, don't expect them to change the system so much as the system to change them. Also, the kind of factory, you know, person in, person out attitude means that nobody really leaves the floor without seeing obstetric violence. Everybody kind of leaves with their own story of witnessing things that you shouldn't have to witness. So we're getting close to time. So I took a slide out. I took the next slide out. But the slide was innovative, a glimmer of hope, innovative solutions that are coming, that Black women are basically enforcing right now. If you have any questions about it, I would love to talk about it because they are very, very cool. But okay, so that brings us to what can you do? What can you do with all of this information that we just gave about maternal mortality and Black women who are caught in the system? More than anything, you can help raise funds. Money by far is the biggest barrier to maternal or racial disparities in maternal mortality. We need money to help more Black people access the midwifery or even the obstetric field. We need money for Black families to access home birth. We need money for Black midwives to keep their birth centers open. We need money for everything. And we do not have nearly enough grant writers, nonprofits, philanthropists, anybody to give us money working on this problem. Why do we need money so bad? Okay, so let's talk about this. Not even getting to the point that we all know that money is absolutely and intrinsically linked to power. All public scholarships require you to be a certified nurse midwife. Right now, there are no public scholarships paying people to go to what we call MEEC accredited, which is midwifery birth schools. So you have to be a nurse midwife. In order to be a nurse midwife, this is a master's level degree. So first you have to pay for your undergraduate degree, and then you have to pay for your graduate degree, and then you have to pay for your licensing. Same thing goes with the physician side. On top of that, if you do decide to open a practice outside of the hospital, excuse me, most insurances do not cover home births. So while home births cost a fraction of hospital births, the average is $7,000. Medicaid only covers $700. So even if I do open my birth center, right, the people who need these options the most cannot afford them. But hospital births are covered. That doesn't just affect the family who has to go to the hospital. That affects this Black midwife who is trying to provide more options to a hospital because now she can't keep the lights on in her practice. On top of that, Money is power. So the fact that these Black midwives are trying to provide alternatives to the hospitals, but they don't have the money to sustain it, means that it's that much harder to get the attention of their legislators and lobby and speak for what their community needs, because money is power. I think I've belabored the point, but if I haven't, please ask questions. Last but not least, we need boundaries. We need more people to advocate for Black centering and racial concordance, which is basically one of those innovative solutions that are being led by Black women, which is we need more people to protect Black spaces. A very, very persistent problem that I see here in New England, more so in New England than the South, is that Black women have basically asked the maternal academic world to stop studying us as a problem and start more putting their funds to supporting these endeavors that Black women are leading. And to be completely honest, the overall response has been, no, nah, no, that's not what we want. So that's not what we're going to do. Not only does that perpetuate that that idea that Black women are genetically inferior and that the answer is in our inferiority, but it also takes funds from those Black women who are trying to pursue innovative solutions. Because if all of this money is going to research, that's less money going to people who are creating these solutions. That's a massive problem. Not only is that a problem, but that's incredibly violent. If you have a group of Black women saying, hey, please stop doing this, we need you to do this. And all the while people are dying, and a community uses white privilege to say that's not what we're going to do, and we have money, so that's not what we have to do. I wish I did include the innovative solution slide, because this is quite a negative note to end on. But with that being said, this is the note that we do end on. So what I'm going to do is go back to this. So this will be the last slide that everybody sees. That is it. Thank you for listening to this entire presentation. Please let me know if you have questions.
That was beautiful. Oops, sorry, can I talk?
This is Lucinda, everybody. Lucinda is the Black midwife in Connecticut. She is not a, she is the, I'm very grateful for her. She kind of inspired me to get my septum piercing.
Yeah, I just want to say that was beautiful, and I love those pictures. I love those pictures. And you just give the history that if people are going to work with Black women, they need to know that history. So I appreciate you sharing that, because we know there's a lot of things that happened then that are still impacting us today. So I just want to thank you for that. And I just want to say, I'll say one more thing and I'll stop talking. The story that you shared about what happened with the woman who delivered, you do bring up an important issue. One is that we don't listen to Black women. It would have been 5 minutes to get her in the shower. But the other part is that I'm disappointed about is those nurses showed you that's what nursing means to them. And as a student, we can't be that comfortable with that. Even if they don't normally do it, to just say, we have a student here, Ashleigh, she's Black, the patient's Black. Even though we don't normally do this, let's do this for Ashleigh. Do you know what I mean? Just that's what nursing is that you don't think about the time, you do what you have to do for the patient. And none of us wants to be sitting up in anything dirty. So I'm just saying that we have to change the foundation of nursing, especially if we want midwives to be nurses first. We have to show them why we believe that. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying if that's our requirement, then as nurses, let's step up and show them. Because we know a midwife with no nursing training would not have done that to a patient. But so that's just my 2 cents. I just feel we have to create the right environment, especially if we're acting like we don't think we're contributing to disparities. Because I can go on and on about that, so I won't. But I'm just saying, Ashleigh, you did the right thing. They failed you. They failed you. I don't even know what else to say. You did the right thing, because that's how our system sets up, and you did the right thing by talking about it. It's going to change. It's going to get there, but that's the position that we're often put in, because that's how embedded racism is in our society. And that's why nurses could feel comfortable practicing that way. So they were wrong, and they failed you. You tried, you did something, you were there for the patient on some level that is difficult for us to understand, but even the patient seeing and knowing that you're there for her and that you tried, that's priceless to her. Because if she's in the system, she already knows how it is. So trust me, she understands as well. But just keep talking about it. And that's the only way change will happen.
My mom, I was telling her a story. She's L&D too. And she was like, Ashleigh, did you watch her check her fundus? Like, did you? So if, in case nobody, if someone's saying they're sitting in a pool of blood, it could mean that they're hemorrhaging. So you have to make sure that you're checking their fundus. And I was like, no, because I went to go get the walker. She's like, Ashleigh, the last thing that woman could have heard alive is you can't take a shower because you could take one at postpartum. And then because if no one checked her fundus, she would have bled out, and that would have been the last thing she heard. And then we would have had, and that would have been my first example of maternal morbidity, of racial disparities in maternal morbidity, right there, boom, done. You can't take a shower, and that is heavy to so quickly, so like that blink of an eye, be that what's the word, integral inducted into a system that led to a Black woman dying. And that is heavy. That was a heavy, it still sucks. It's still very hard for me to figure out how to mentally process.
I want to talk about some of the innovative solutions that you cut off from your PowerPoint. I know you don't have like a pretty slide to talk about it, but maybe you can just talk about it, and Lucinda, if you have anything else to add to the innovative solutions that Ashleigh talks about, I would also love to hear your input.
So Lucinda is one of the innovative solutions that are happening, because Lucinda, along with a group of women known as Earth's Natural Touch, which is the largest Black doula collective in New England, are working with the governor in order to create state funding for doulas, to provide all Black women with doulas, regardless of income, so that, because this student nurse who didn't say she can take a shower, a doula could have been in the room and said, no, she can take a shower. So that's one innovative solution. In University of California, San Francisco, there is a program called Embrace, and I want to say it is headed by Dr. Andrea Johnson. I will absolutely look that up and just tell you when you get home. But Embrace, it's beloved, and there's one more, but they are very, very cool. Basically, what they're doing is Black-centered racially concordant care. And what that means, racially concorded peripartum group care. What that means is, number one, all of their childbirth education, all of their lactation consultants, all of their physicians and their patients are Black, unapologetically. It is Black-centered. Everything surrounds Blackness. On top of that, it's peripartum group, or prenatal group. So it's, I think, 6 to 8 for one group, and 3 to 5 for another group. And they go through their 40 weeks of gestation of prenatal care together as a group. They get to know each other, they support each other, and then they meet for their postpartum care as well. It's racially concordant. So their physicians and their providers, all of the doulas, all of the lactation consultants, all of the childbirth educators and the physicians, if it does turn out to be a high-risk pregnancy, everyone is Black. And the results of Embrace is they've had 27 clients, 0 preterm births, 0 maternal deaths, and 0 neonatal mortalities. They also have, I just sent this this number out. Alana, it's in your email. If you, I think I emailed it to you if you have it. But the average Black breastfeeding rate is, I want to say, in the 40s in the country, maybe even lower, maybe in the 20s. I will look that up when you get home as well. But the average breastfeeding rate is within the 40s to 20s. There it's in the 90s. So the results of this group care, Black-centered care are out of this world. Now, just a few things that, like, I would not be Ashleigh if I did not say. California legalized, like, licenses their professional midwives. So you have home birth midwives in California, nurse midwives, OBs, and not too many states are going to allow a healthcare facilities unapologetically say we cater and serve Black clients, Black identifying clients, and Black identified clients only. So California is a very, very special place. But, right, it is a gold standard. It shows what happens when you do. It changes, it literally changes the statistics. While literally the rest of the country is looking into weathering, right? They said, we're going to change it. We're not going to wait for you to give us permission. We're going to do it on our own. And what happens is babies don't die, women don't die, breastfeeding occurs, and babies are born on time. So that's Embrace, Beloved. There is one more at UCSF. It's just opening. They are not taking people until, they're taking people now, but with due dates of September. There is a pretty much nationwide push for doula, that state-funded doula program. Lucinda, don't kill me. My only thing is, we need doulas in the hospital, but the hospital needs to change. And subjecting more Black women to the hospital system is kind of damaging in itself. It's like a bulletproof vest, right? Like, bulletproof vest works, but they also take the brunt of the bullet. Why don't we stop shooting bullets or, creating trauma in, with our Black patients? But I wholly support and agree with, like, ENT and the work of Lucinda. They're like huge role models, but our hospital system needs to change.
Yes, if you even look at the history of Black maternal health in this country, when we had, traditional midwives in the home, they didn't have all the resources. And there were, throughout the country, were significant maternal mortality, infant mortality rates. And, even among white women, but there was like a 2-to-1, where 2 times, greater risk for Black women. And when there was a shift going into the hospital, you would think that the maternal mortality rates would improve, but they did not. And even now, and that's the 1940s, that's pre-civil rights, that's segregation, that was legalized racism. But look at now, where allegedly we have our rights and our maternal mortality rates are worse. So we know the hospital, unfortunately, is killing us. But the other part, and this is like something that I'm looking into, is that the Black body is having money made off of it, whether you're dead or alive. So as long as, if you die, we still get paid. If you live, we get paid. So they're not losing. So that's why it's so difficult for them to say, let's keep women safe. I went to a meeting yesterday, and this is part of what I do, and I recommend this for everyone, is to just be involved with what's happening in your state, in your town, because they want to have packages, maternal health bundles, they're calling them. And people at the meeting were making sure, and one of the main reasons they're doing is to decrease maternal, health disparities in maternal mortality, decreasing cesarean rates. But everyone in the meeting, they want to get their money. They were like, well, if she goes here, do we still get paid? You know, if I do, there was one woman that I was saying they want to stop after this funding after 60 days for the mothers. But the research says maternal deaths happen up to a year. But anyways, somebody said, I said, what about thinking about extending it for a year? And someone goes, well, if we see, you know, we do their postpartum check and then we have them come back in 6 months, are we going to get paid for the annual if you do that? I'm like, how about making sure that she lives so that you can have her come back every year for her annual? So I just say that it's still people are looking for the money. And that's the problem with our society. We really have to look at women on a human level and realizing that it's okay to be cost effective. You can still make some money. And it's unfortunate we have to think that way. But the hospital systems, we know that we're not safe. We're not safe. And that's, I'm a nurse midwife. I don't feel safe in our healthcare system. So there has to be major changes, but definitely bringing it back to the community, because that's the other thing. When they delivered at home, you had neighbors check on you. You had people bring you food. You had people from the community that lived in the community delivering your baby. So anyways, there's a cultural shift that has to be changed. And we have to even just go back to our roots, seeing the value in having Black people from the community. We know how to solve problems. We know we live it every day. So we know what we need to take care of ourselves and look at what you're doing in society that's preventing that from happening. So there has to be a major cultural shift. And I'm hoping now, I'm not saying it may not happen in my lifetime, but I'm hoping that now people start to look at this and start to take it serious, because what's working is not improving for us. And I still believe the maternal deaths are 3 to 4 times greater than white women. They're playing with the numbers a little bit because they're looking at maternal deaths up to 6 weeks. So when they do it that way, they could say 2 to 3. But let's go out to a year, you'll be 3 to 4. And in some states in this country are 7 times. New Jersey is ridiculous. You know, we always talk about the South, but let's come back up north. So I'm just saying that you could play with the numbers, but what's happening, we're still dying. So what are those major changes you're going to do so that we could live? That's all we want, to be seen as human and live. So we could go back to our communities and care for our communities.
And it comes back for me. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No. Do you have a question?
I did. I was just going to quickly follow up with a question. I'm going to be a family nurse practitioner, and I'll most likely be doing primary care and then also following families for their lifespan. And so I wanted to hear your input on, like, what can I do as a primary care provider to prevent and then to support even after, to like Black women and Black birthing people, like how I can do that as a primary care provider. Even though I'm not like actively there part of the birth, I just want to know what my part is leading up to it, and then after, and then even during checking in, even though I'm not going to be as involved in the process.
Okay. I love this question. And like now I provide reproductive health. So I'm there before, but I also took on this role of helping women prepare for their childbirth, especially that first one. So as that family primary care provider, you can already start talking to them and making sure that they keep annual visits, but also each visit educating them and letting them understand their rights. Because sometimes too, they choose an OB provider, they think they have to stay with them. But by you providing that education, because I'm telling you now, Black women are scared. They're like, I want to have a baby, but I'm scared. I'm hearing everything on the news. So start telling them what they can do to be healthy, but also help them be in a position where they could be able to make decisions when they go into childbirth. And let them know a lot of women don't go back to their providers for their 6-week checkup because some of them are traumatized by that experience. So you also telling them, you know, I don't want to be like, don't go to your provider, you could come see me, but say, you know, I'm an option that after you deliver, I can be here for you to provide your care. And even during your pregnancy, stay in touch with me. Because I know all the time I'm referring back to their primary care if they have asthma or any other conditions. So letting them know that you're still there for them. A lot of people are like, you're pregnant, bye. But letting them know I'm still here. You want to see me, you want to talk with me, I'm still here for you. Because I find that even through pregnancy, they have questions about things. But sometimes as providers, we just give them one angle. You got to do this for you and the baby. Let's do this to make sure the baby's safe. But that doesn't really help them. So sometimes they need someone else that they could talk to, and just being that voice for them if they need that. I think that's so important. And just one last thing I'll say, and I have to run to for another meeting. But the other thing is, if they do have issues that come up in pregnancy, say if you have issues with your blood pressure or anything, come see me after. Because a lot of women have issues and they think once the pregnancy is done, they're done, but they need to know where they can go after to continue care. Because the postpartum is where, again, they say 50 to 60% of the cases happen. So just being there for them. And any woman that comes in, I'm always like, you're pregnant until proven otherwise. When you come, you can say your ear is itching. Are you pregnant? So after, say, have you had a baby in the last year? Because you'll find a lot of women had their babies and didn't go back, or they had things that happened but were never addressed. And they could have symptoms related to that. So that's just my kind of, because I feel like we all can be a part of a solution to care for these women and improve their outcomes.
So actually,
Thank you.
I have to run to another meeting. I'm so sorry, but
that
thank
was
you.
fun.
Keep having these, Ashleigh.
I love you so much.
Everyone, take care.
Thanks, Lucinda.
Thanks, Lucinda. Bye.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
Thanks for coming, Allie. I love you.
You're amazing.
Yes.
That was fantastic, Ashleigh. Wonderful, 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 and so brilliant, inspiring, and thought-provoking.
Was it?
Absolutely. You so good. So good. Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate
It was like at the like the old adage, like you want to leave the party while you're still having fun. You want to leave them wanting more, as opposed to like talking people to death. Like you really you kind of dropped some things in your talk, and it was like, oh my gosh, I really want to know more about that. And it was like, I want to know more about that. So I feel like you really set the stage for just like laying a foundation for curiosity and for wanting, like knowing that we need to do better and we need to know more and keep pursuing this.
You make me feel so good.
It was brilliant. It was really, truly brilliant. And I love your story. So thank you so much for sharing that. It like, even just saying the story, even like, it's not like surprising. Like I've seen that story a million times, but that's part of the problem, is that then you become desensitized to it and you stop paying attention, and you become a little bit less outraged, and we need to like keep the fire up. So thank you for that as well. Fantastic. Mwah. Thank you. Bye everyone. Have a wonderful Friday.
See you later.